Welcome to Unit 5, Lesson 10. Today, our target is still I can divide decimal numbers. We are going to do it by deciding whether a word problem involving decimals can be solved by using multiplication or by using division. In Unit 4, you did just word problems that were multiplication. So far in Unit 5, you've done word problems that were just division. I kept telling you, pay attention so you get used to the different patterns. Now you have to decide, like in real life, you have to decide what operation do I have to do to solve this. Other things we'll be doing is by predicting and then computing the results of operations with whole numbers and decimal numbers. So when we multiply, we are going to predict, is the product going to be greater or less than what we started with? And when we divide, we're going to predict, is the quotient going to be greater or less than what we started with? And finally, we're going to work on dividing decimals by practicing decimal multiplication and division. We will do a lot of problems in this unit, or in this lesson. In fact, when I've been in school with students teaching this lesson, spent up to 3 days on it. So don't be surprised if it takes you several days to do it on your own. So go to page 225. Many of you don't have a book. That's okay. I have the problem right here for you. Just pause the video when you need to work something out. Now, problem solving. Read the problem, then answer the question. A turtle walks 2/10 of a mile in 1 hour. How far can it walk in 5/10 of an hour? I teach my students, I talk about this all the time. First, what do I know? I know the turtle walks 2/10 of a mile in an hour. What am I looking for? How far can it walk in 5/10 of an hour? So do I need to multiply or divide to solve this problem? Will the answer be more or less than 2/10 of a mile? And what is the answer? So as I think about this, he's walking less than a complete hour. So I know he's going to walk less than 2/10 of a mile. So I can answer that question. Now I have to decide, will I multiply or divide? Well, getting less a lot of times makes me think divide. But as I look at this, he's walking 1/5 of an hour. 1/5 or 5/10, of an hour means it's 5/10 of a group of 2/10 of a mile. A group of something is multiplication. So I need to multiply. But I said that'll give me less. Well, what's my answer end up being? 1/10 of a mile. That is less than 2/10. Let's take a look at that. 2/10 of a mile multiplied by 5/10 of a mile. Well, I multiply as if I have no decimals. 2 multiplied by 5 is 10. And then I count my decimal places. 1 decimal place in this factor, 1 in this factor for 2 decimal places. 1, 2. Wow, that's 10 hundredths, which is equivalent to 1/10. It is 1/10 of a mile. It did get less when I multiplied. Crazy. All right, you give number 2 a try. Gus ran 3 6/10 miles. He took a sip of water every 9/10 of a mile. How many sips did he take? Well, let's think about what do we know. We know he's running 3 6/10 miles. We know he's going to take a sip every 9/10 of a mile. What do we want to know? We want to know how many sips does he take. So now we need to figure out what we're doing. Do I need to multiply or divide to solve? Will the answer be greater or less than 3 6/10? What is my answer? Remember last time? As I thought through it, I figured out greater or less than first. Then I decided whether I should multiply or divide. Then I got my answer. Go ahead and come up with yours and then unpause it when you've got it figured out, or hit play, I should say. Welcome back. So what do I think? Gus ran 3 6/10 miles. He took a sip of water every 9/10 of a mile. How many sips do you take? Well, taking a sip every 9/10 of a mile would be breaking the 3 6/10 into equal groups of 9/10 of a mile. I can demonstrate that with a diagram. Oh, whoa, that was terrible, Mr. Springer. Let's redraw it. My mouse isn't working. So let's redraw it. So if that is the total distance of 3 6/10 miles, and I'm going to put it into equal groups of 9/10, and I want to know how many 9/10 are in there. That's division, isn't it? So I think I need to divide. So is it going to be more or less than 3 9/10? Well, each of these is less than 1. So I'm looking for groups that are less than 1 whole in there. I think it's going to be greater than 3 9/10. I'm right. Well, let's see what our answer is. They say our answer is 4 sips. Well, let's take a look at it. Hopefully my mouse is working a little bit better. 3 9/10 getting broken up into groups of 9/10. All right, so first of all, I am going to multiply my divisor by 10 to make it 9, and my dividend by 10 to make it 39. So there's where my decimal will go. How many 9s in, oh, that's supposed to be a 6. Oh, silly me. 36. How many 9s in 36? There are 4 9s in 36. 4 9s are 36. I have 0. So that's how we got 4 sips. It makes sense because I put it in groups less than 1. So I would need more than 3 6/10 groups. Go ahead and try 3, 4, and 5 the same way I did them. I will scroll down so you can see them. There's 3 and 4 and part of 5. There's the rest of 5. When you're done, unpause to see my work. Okay, welcome back. So, last year, 135 cows on Dixie's dairy farm had calves. This year, 6/10 times that many cows had calves. How many cows had calves this year? Do I need to multiply or divide to solve? Let's see. I know that last year there was 135 cows that had calves. This year it's 6/10 times that many. So 6/10 times 135. In this case, the word times actually means to multiply, doesn't it? So will there be greater or less than 135? Well, 6/10 times as many is going to be less than one whole group of 135. So there's going to be less than 135. And let's see, our answer is 81 cows. All right, so let's try it and take a look at it. 135 multiplied by 6/10 6 multiplied by 5 is 30. 6 multiplied by 3 is 18, plus 3 is 21. And 6 multiplied by 1 is 6, plus 2 is 81. I have 1 decimal place in my factors, so 1 decimal place in my product. It is 81 cows. It is less than 135, which makes sense because it's less than one whole group of 135. Number 4, a box contains 1 2/10 pounds of cereal. A serving weighs 8/10 of a pound. How many servings are in the box? Do I need to multiply or divide to solve? Well, what do I know? A box contains 1 2/10 pounds of cereal. It has 1 2/10 of pounds in the box. A serving is 8/100 of a pound. So one serving is less than a pound. So I know this answer actually. There's going to be more than 1 2/10 servings, isn't there? Because each serving is much less than 1 pound. So there's going to be more. It's going to be greater. So am I going to multiply or divide? Well, when I serve cereal into equal servings of 8/10, I'm dividing the 1 2 pounds into groups of 1 8/10. So I need to divide, don't I? So what does our answer get? Remember, it should be greater than 1 2/10. It is. It's 15 servings. Let's take a look at it. All right. I have 1 2/10 pounds being divided into servings of 8/100. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to multiply my divisor by 10 to make it 8. To keep an equivalent division problem, I have to multiply my dividend by 10. Or no, I'm sorry, I multiplied it by 100 to make it 8. So I have to multiply my dividend by 100 to make it 12. Oh, attach a 0, 120. So I now have 120 divided by 8. Let's go to a different color here. There aren't any 8s in 1, but there's 1 8 in 12. One group of 8 would be I used 8 of them. And then 12 subtract 8 is 4. 4 is less than 8, so I can bring down. How many 8s in 40? There are 5. 5 8s are 40. And I do end up with nothing left. So I did get 15 servings. Makes sense to me because I'm taking 1 8/10 pounds, but I'm breaking it up into little tiny pieces. I want to know how many little 8/100 are in there. And there's 15 8/100 in 1 2/10. Number 5, a rectangular patio has an area of 131 and 5,200 square meters, and a width of the patio is 9 6/10 meters. What is the length? So many of you know, whenever I have area of a rectangle, I'm going to draw a picture of it. So they told me the area is 100, so the space inside it is 131 and 52 hundredths square meters. I'm not going to write that because I don't have the space, or can I do it with this pen very well? The width is 9 6/10. Super easy. Multiply or divide. You got it. I have to divide because I know length multiplied by width equals area. So if I know the area, I'm going to divide it by the width to get the length. Will the answer be greater than or less than 131 and 52 hundredths meters? Well, I'm dividing it into groups greater than 1. So I'm going to have less than 131 and 52 hundredths. They say the answer should be 13 7/10. And let's take a look at it. 131 and 52 hundredths divided by 9 6/10. Change colors. Multiply by 10 changes my divisor to 96. Multiply my dividend by 10 changes my dividend to 1,315 and 2/10. Now, any 96s in 1? Nope. Any 96s in 13? Nope. Any 96s in 131? Yep. There's about 1 100 in 131, so there's about 196 in 131. So my estimate is 1. One group of 96 is 96. You know what? These guys are kind of confusing me. I'm going to cross out this decimal that's not there anymore. There we go. Now I can use my math talk subtraction strategies and count up from 96. Up 4 is 100. Up 31 more would be 131. 31 and 4 is 35. So my estimate was correct. I can now bring down my 5. How many 96s and 355? Well, 96 is about 100. There's 3 hundreds in 355, so there's about 3 96s in 135. 3 multiplied by 96. Well, 3 multiplied by 6 is 18. 3 multiplied by 9 is 27, plus 1 is 28. I did not overestimate. As I subtract, again, I can count up. Up 2 would be 290. Up 10 more would be 300. And then 55 more. So 55, 10, and 2 is 67. Less than 96, so I'm good to go. Bring down my 2. There's about 6 100s in 96, or in 672, so there's about 6 96s. I'm going to go to the side to multiply that. Six times 6 is 36. 6 times 9 is 54. Plus 3 is 57. 576. I did not overestimate. As I subtract, though, look what I find out. On group 12, subtract 6 is 6. 6 subtract 7, I need to ungroup. 16 subtract 7 is 9. I underestimated. I can get one more. Wait, if I can get exactly one more, though, the nice thing is all I have to do is adjust that part of my quotient up one more. 13 and 7/10, and that's what they got. Cool. All right. This part is really confusing, but it's the part that they really want you to get. So I'm going to read a problem. I want you to think about it. Pause the video, think about it, and see what you think. Then unpause it, and I'll help you through it a little bit. So if A and B are whole numbers greater than 1, will B multiplied by A be greater than or less than A? Why? So pause the video and think about it and try and come up with an answer. If you can't come up with an answer, then, or when you get an answer, then hit play. All right. I like to think of it this way. A and B are whole numbers greater than 1. So if I say A is 6 and B is 3, all right, so A is 6 and B is 3. Will B multiplied by A be greater than or less than A? So is 3 multiplied by 6 greater than or less than 6? Why? It's greater, right? Well, why? Why is it greater? The product is more than, because the product is more than one copy of A. So it is greater than A. 3 multiplied by 6 means 3 copies or groups of 6. It's more than one group of 6. Since B is greater than 1, I have more than one copy or more than one group of 6. So whenever you're multiplying by a factor greater than 1, you're going to get more than how many you started with. All right. Now let's, keeping that in mind, if A is a whole number and D is a decimal less than 1, will D multiplied by A be greater than or less than A? Why? Go ahead, pause it and think about it. When you get an answer or if you get stuck, you can play the video. Okay, welcome back. Let's think about it again. If A is a whole number, so A is going to be 6, and D is a decimal less than 1, so D is going to be 5/10. Will D multiplied by A, 5/10, multiplied by 6, be greater than or less than A? So see if you can figure that out and then play the video. It's going to be less than 6. 5/10 multiplied by 6 is less than 6, right? The product represents only part of A. Why is that? Well, I'm only taking part of a group of 6. I'm taking 5/10 of a group of 6. Basically half of 6, aren't I? 5/10 of a group of 6 is 5/10. 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 5/10 of a group of 6 is So if I'm taking less than one group of 6, I'm going to have less than 6, aren't I? So it kind of is backwards of what you learned before. Well, we originally learned, yeah, when we multiply, we get a greater number, but the reason was you were always multiplying whole numbers. When you're multiplying by a decimal, what you get is less because you're taking less than a whole group. So using that and what we've talked about so far, if A and B are whole numbers greater than 1, will A divided by B be greater than or less than A, Y? Pause the video, then start it when you're ready. So you should have thought, hey, well, if A is 6 and B is 3, will A, 6, divided by B, 3, be greater than or less than A6? Well, it's less, right? Why is it less? Because we're dividing A into a whole number of parts. We're taking 6 and we're taking out whole number parts. I need to use 3 wholes to make each part, don't I? So each part is going to be less than 6. Now, but if A is a whole number and D is a decimal less than 1, will A divided by D be greater than or less than AY? So take and think about that and then play the video when you're ready. So in this case, whoops, I have A, a whole number. So A is 6 again. And D is a decimal less than 1. So D can be our 5/10. Is A divided by D. So when I take 6 and divide it, oh, come on. Sorry. Take 6 and divide it by 5/10. Will my quotient be greater than or less than A? So when I take 6/10 and divide it into groups of 5/10, is it going to be greater or less than 6/10? Or 6, sorry. And it's going to be greater. Why is it greater than 6? Because I'm dividing into parts smaller than a whole, so there will be more than a number of parts. There's going to be more than 6 parts. I'm taking 6 and I'm putting it into parts that are less than 1. I'm putting it into parts that are 5/10 or a half. So each one, or I'm going to have more than 6 of them. Think of it this way. Oops. If I had 6, and I divide them into 5/10, which is basically dividing each of them into a half, right? I'm going to have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I have more than 6 5/10. 5/10, 5/10, 5/10, 5/10, 5/10, 5/10, 5/10, 5/10, 5/10, 5/10, 5/10. So again, it's just kind of the opposite of what you learned before. You learned before when you were dividing, you would get less. Well, when you divide it by a whole number like 3, yeah, you do have less. Because that 6 in that case, those 6 gets divided into groups of 3. 1, 2 groups of 3. And since we're putting more than one whole in each group, I have to have less than 6 groups. But when you're dividing by a decimal less than 1, you have more than 1 in each whole. All right, so using that knowledge, take a look at the 2 expressions. Remember, expression shows a value, it doesn't have an equal sign, and it doesn't have a variable. It just shows the value. So this value compared to this value. Go ahead and do 10 through 17, and then play the video to see what we got. All right, let's see how you did. Is multiplying 356 by 42 going to be greater than or less than dividing 356 by 42? It is going to be greater because I have more than one group of 352 here, and I'm breaking 356 into groups more than one in a group. Is 832 divided by 67 greater than, less than, or equal to taking 832 and dividing it by 67 hundredths? It is less. Here I'm dividing them into groups greater than 1. Here I'm dividing it into groups less than 1. So there's more than 1 in each one of these. Is taking 126 and dividing it by 9/10 greater than, less than, or equal to taking 126 and multiplying it by 9/10? It would be greater because when I'm dividing by 9/10, I'm seeing how many groups less than 1 are there, and there's going to be more than one group in each one of the 126, where here I'm taking less than one whole group of 126. Is 64 multiplied by 64 hundredths greater than, less than, or equal to 64 divided by 64 hundredths? And it would also be less than. Here I'm taking less than one group of 64. I'm multiplying by less than 1, so it gets less than 64. Here I'm putting it into groups smaller than 1, so I'm going to have greater than 64 groups. Number 11 is taking 561 multiplied by 65 hundredths greater than, less than, or equal to taking 561 and dividing it by 65 hundredths. And that would be less than. Here I'm taking less than one whole group of 561. Here I'm taking 561 and putting it into more than 561 groups because the groups are less than 1. 738 multiplied by 66 greater than, less than, or equal to 738 multiplied by 66 hundredths. It is greater. Here I have more than 66 groups of 738. Here I have less than one group of 738. Here I have more than one group. I have 666 groups. Here I have less than one group. 3,500 multiplied by 7/10 greater than, less than, or equal to 3,500 multiplied by 7. Well, that's going to be less Here, I'm taking less than one group of 3,500, so I have less than 3,500. Here, I'm taking more than one group of 3,500, so I have more than 3,500. And finally, 5,602 divided by 42 compared to 5,602 divided by 42 hundredths. And that would be less than. Here, I'm putting it into groups of 42. I'm going to have less than 5,602 groups of 42 because each group has more than one in it. Here, I'm going to have more than 5,602 because each group has less than one hole in it. When I divide by less than 1, my quotient is greater than what I started. When I divide by greater than 1, my quotient is less than what I started. Making predictions. So now use that to make predictions. Pause the video and complete the entire page 227, and then play the video and I'll discuss them. So take a quick look at it. Here's 18 and 19. Here's 20 and 21, and I drew a diagram already for you because I always draw a diagram when they're talking about rectangles and area. And there's 22. Okay, so by now you should have finished these. Number 18, Farmer Ortigoza has 124 6/10 acres of land. Farmer Reuben has 8/10 times as much land as Farmer Ortigoza. Does Farmer Reuben have more or less than 124 6/10 acres? Let me see. Farmer Reuben has 8/10 times as much as Farmer Ortigoza. So he has 8/10 times 124 6/10. Is 8/10 times 124 6/10 more or less than 124 6/10? And that would be less. And how do I know that? It is less than one group of 124 6/10. So I don't know what happened to this. I did this work already. It should all be here, but it disappeared on me. So I'll have to work it out for you. That's okay. 124 6/10 multiplied by 8/10. 8 multiplied by 6 is 48. 8 multiplied by 4 is 32, plus 4 is 36. 8 multiplied by 2 is 16, plus 3 is 19. 8 multiplied by 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9. 1, 2 decimal places in my factors, 1, 2 decimal places in my product. 99 68 hundredths acres. I know it's reasonable because it's less than 124 6/10 acres. Number 19, if you don't think you got it right, check it before you listen to my answer. Mi Young has 48 meters of crepe paper. She will cut it into strips that are each 6/10 of a meter long. Will Mi Young get more or fewer than 48 strips? Well, she is 48 meters, but she's cutting it or dividing it into 6/10 meter pieces. Well, she's going to get, since she's cutting it into pieces less than a meter, she's going to have more than 48. And how many did she end up having? But 80 strips. And it didn't show up for me again, so I'm going to have to do it. So she had 48 meters. She's cutting them, or basically dividing them into 6/10 meter pieces. I'm going to multiply my divisor by 10 to make it a whole number. So I have to multiply my dividend by 10, which just scooches just attaches the 0 and scooches everything once to the left. And now I have 480 divided by 6. Well, that's pretty much mental math. I know that 8 multiplied by 6 is 48, so 80 multiplied by 6 is 480. And I'm left with 0. All right. Now, if you don't think you had number 20 correct before, you can retry it. Otherwise, keep playing. Jen's garden is a rectangle with length 3 5/10 meters and a width of 75 hundredths of a meter. Is the area of the garden greater or less than 3 5/10? Well, since this is less than 1 whole, it would have to be 1 whole. It would have to be 1 whole meter wide to be 3 5/10 meters square, right? So to me, it's going to be less. And how much less? It is going to end up being 2 65 hundredths square meters. All right. And again, mine's not showing up, so I need to redo it. Doesn't matter which one I put on top. I'm going to go with the 75 hundredths on top and the 3 5/10 as my bottom factor. Remember, multiplication is commutative, so order doesn't matter. 75 multiplied by 5. First multiply the 5 by the 1s. That's 25. 5 multiplied by the 10s is 35 plus 2 is 37. 7 multiplied by 0 is 0 plus 3 is 3. Now the 75 multiplied by the 30, which I'm going to just put in a 0 and then think of it as multiplying by 3. Now 3 multiplied by the 1s is 15. 3 multiplied by the 10s is 21 plus 1 is 22. Should have crossed that out before. Good thing I'm using a different color. 3 multiplied by 0 is 0 plus 2 more is 2. Add my partial products. 5, 12, 6, 2, and place my decimal. 1, 2, 3 decimal places in my products. 1, 2, 3 decimal places in my factors here, in my product here. 2 and 625 thousandths. So that's correct. I'm going to erase that to get it out of our way before we do the last problem, or the next problem, I should say. All right, 21. Roberto can lift 103 5/10 pounds. That is 9/10 times the amount his friend Vance can lift. Can Vance lift more or less than 103 5/10 pounds? Well, Vance can lift, okay, this is 103, or this is 9/10 times the amount of Vance. So what they're saying is 9/10 times the amount of Vans equals 103 5/10. So 103 5/10 is less than 1 whole group of Vans. So that tells me that Van must lift more. And I'm right. Now, this is a situation equation. To solve it, I need to have a solution equation. Factor multiplied by factor equals product. Fact family takes the product and makes it my dividend. 103 and 5/10 divided by the factor 9/10 gives me the other factor. Now to start this out, I'm going to multiply both my divisor and dividend by 10 to make a whole number divisor. Now the division doesn't look too bad. Let's cross this out so it doesn't confuse me like that other one did. There's no 9s in 1. There's 1 9 in 10. 1 9 is 9. I used 9, so I have 1 left over. Bring down my 3. There's 1 9 in 13. 1 9 is 9 again. I have 4 left over. Bring down my 5. There's 5 9s in 45. 5 9s is 45. I have nothing left over. 115 pounds is how much Van can lift, and that is more than 103 and 5/10, so it makes sense. Less than one group of 115 is going to be less than 115. I'm going to erase that before we do the next one. And if you haven't been doing well on these and you want to retry number 22 before I go over it, that's a great idea. So the Daisy Cafe served 18 liters of hot cocoa today. So altogether 18 liters. Each serving was in a cup that held 2/10 of a liter. Did the cafe serve more or fewer than 18 cups of hot chocolate? Well, each cup only has 2/10 of a liter. They have less than a liter. So if each cup was 1 liter, they would have served 18 cups. Each cup is less than that, so they served more. All right, how many cups did they serve? Well, again, this is division to me because they have 18 liters that they divided equally into 2/10 of a liter in each cup. So first thing I want to do, multiply both my divisor by 10, because that makes it 2, and my dividend by 10 to keep an equivalent division problem, and that makes my decimal point there. Well, this is mental math. I know 18 divided by 2 is 9, so 180 divided by 2 is 90. The correct answer should be 90 cups that they served. And that makes sense. If they're 2/10 of a liter in each cup, they could serve 90 cups. Okay, you're probably several days into this lesson. I know I've been talking a long time. All right, so go ahead and do page 228, and then I'll go over them. Hopefully my answers pop up. There's 23 through 31. There's 32 through check my understanding. Okay, in 23, yay, it shows up. I got 85 hundredths. To check my work, to check division, you multiply. 85 hundredths multiplied by 6 equals 5 and 10 hundredths. If you want to use a calculator to check your division and to check your multiplication, I don't mind that so much. I personally wouldn't want you to check your answer, but more check to see if it's reasonable. Well, 5 divided by 6 is less than 1. My answer is less than 1. Makes sense. 24. All right. I came up with 46 thousandths. And there's my work. Is it reasonable? Sure is. 25. I had to multiply both of them by 10, and I ended up with 9 4/10. Again, you can check with a calculator by multiplying 9 4/10 by 8/10, and you should get 6 54/100. And moving on. This time I had to multiply my divisor and dividend by 100, and I end up with 480. It's reasonable because my answer, this is a little less than 1, and I have a little more than 460, don't I? Multiplying this, I got 32/100. This is reasonable because I have less than 1 multiplied by less than 1 is going to give me less than 1. Here, I got 32 90/100. This is reasonable because I have less than one group of 94. So I have less than 94, and I do. For 29, I got 333 10,000ths. Personally, don't think this is a real reasonable one for you to figure out if it's reasonable, because I have way less than 1 multiplied by way less than 1. I'm way less than 1. I have about 1/10 of 37/100. So I even have less than 37/100. So that does help me a little bit. All right. In this one, I get 1 and 1,583 10,000ths. Again, not really a reasonable one for you to be able to figure out if it's reasonable. But basically, I have less than one group of 4. So my product is less than 4. Is a good way to look at it. Moving on to number 31. Check if your answer is reasonable. Polly bought 12 beach balls for her beach party. She spent $23.64. How much did each beach ball cost? So I'm dividing $23.64 by 12. Each one is going to be less than $23.64. And I got $1.97. To check if my division was reasonable, I thought, hey, 12 is easy to divide by. $23.64 is close to 24, which is divisible by 12 gives me 2. And 1 and 97/100 is close to 2. 32. The 245 fifth graders are going on a trip. Each van can carry 16 students. How many vans will be needed for the trip? I know I have to divide the students into groups, the fifth graders into groups of 16 students to go in the vans. When I divided, I got 16 vans. I know my answer is reasonable because I ended up doing this and saying, hey, 16 is not easy to divide by, but 15 is. I looked at 245 and I looked at the 24 and said 24 is between the multiples 15 or 30 and 15. So I first rounded 245 to 300 divided by 15, which was 20. And then I rounded 245 to 150 divided by 15, which is 10. And my answer of 15 remainder 15 is between 20 and 10. So 16 vans is reasonable. I had to add 1 to my quotient for the remainder because these 15 fifth graders all needed one more bus. Today, Aaliyah ran 4 5/10 miles per hour for 3/4, which is 75 hundredths of an hour. How far did Aaliyah run today? So I know that she did not run for an entire hour. So she's going to run less than 4 5/10 miles. I had to multiply because she ran 75 hundredths of a group of 4 5/10. I got 3 35 hundredths, which is less than 4 5/10. So my answer is reasonable. And then when I thought about it, 75 hundredths rounds to 1. And 4 5/10 rounds to 5. 5 multiplied by 1 is 5. And 3 375 hundredths is close to 5. So that's how I did check that for reasonableness. Making the statements true by using greater than or less than. A, meaning some number multiplied by 3/10, is greater than or less than A. So you should be thinking, hey, I'm taking less than one group of A here. So this is going to be less than 1 whole A. And you should have gotten less than. A divided by 3/10 is greater than or less than A. I am saying is, hey, this is taking some number A and taking out groups of 3/10 or putting it into groups of 3/10. I'm going to have more than A groups because each group is less than 1 whole. So it should be greater than A. And one thing to do would be to substitute numbers in here. Try like 6 and see what you get. So that is lesson 10. Like I said, it probably took you several days. The most major concept was this right here, that when you multiply by less than 1, you get something less than what you started with. When you divide by less than 1, you get a quotient greater than what you started with. Have a great day.